Hello, welcome guys. Welcome to the Joy Family Show. This is Joy, your host, and I'm here with an amazing sister, Yema Ferreira. And we are going to be talking an amazing, powerful, important conversation, which is mental health from an African spiritual perspective. Hi, Yema, welcome.
Hi, Joy. Thank you.
Yeah, I am so excited. I was telling you that I feel like this is a very, very important conversation, and your ancestors inspired you to come up with this. But yeah, welcome. Let's start with that. With the beginning.
Thank you, Joy. So what's the beginning?
The beginning of your interest in this conversation, but then taking it a bit further to how you arrived to the work that you are doing now and how we arrived to today, right?
Mm.
Mm.
Well, I think this conversation, first of all, thank you for initiating this conversation because I think it's a very important conversation. And I think that conversations, a lot can happen in conversations. I think that words are very powerful, and a lot happens in the exchange of words. I'm a psychotherapist, so I work with words, and often my clients are very surprised at the changes that happen within them within the course of, say, 3 to 6 months, and they say, but we're not even doing anything, we're just talking.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
I really appreciate having conversations about important topics.
Mm.
How I came to do the work that I do. Maybe I should say a little bit about myself. My name is Yema Ferreira. I am a psychotherapist. I work with Black women, and I work specifically with Black women around, well, with whatever mental health challenges they bring, but also very much with an eye on identity, especially because I am in Europe. I am based in Copenhagen, so most of my clients are somewhere around Europe. I have a few clients in Africa as well, in different countries, but most of my clients are here. And identity for Black people in general, and for Black women specifically, in Europe, in the West, in very white spaces, is a big issue.
Mm.
So we work a lot on identity, and I believe very much that it's our job to define our own identity. You know, nobody else gets to do that. But if we don't do it, other people will do it. So, and that work fits into, I guess, what I think of as my bigger work. I also believe that we all come with a mission. We all come to do something, and that is one part. For me, that is one part of the bigger work that I hope to be able to do in this world before I go.
Yeah.
But I've always known that I wanted to work therapeutically with people. I've always known very clearly as a very small child. I didn't know what that meant in terms of a profession. I didn't know necessarily what kind of training or studies I had to undergo, but I knew exactly what I was supposed to be doing. And I think that my life has just been a progressive moving towards that. And as there's never an end, really, as long as we are alive, I'm actually quite curious to see how it will continue to evolve. I mean, I call myself a psychotherapist now, today, because I am trained as a psychotherapist, but I wonder where I'll be in 20 years, what I'll be doing in 20 years.
It is so exciting to think about that, about the future, considering that we're always morphing, always changing. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a great future. I love your work as a psychotherapist and working on identity, when I started doing conversation, one of the things that came up a lot for me, holding conversations with African in the diaspora, was identity, a sense of belonging, trying to find who you are in, belonging to many cultures, existing, being a local to many spaces. And it's been very interesting. And I think because I think for you must be very urgent, this sense of belonging must be a very urgent thing. Where do I belong in this many spaces I belong to? How do I form an identity in each one? Sometimes I imagine it will feel like that's separate. For me, I've the only time I've ever came close to asking myself that question, but it was never really urgent for me, was when I was living in India. And that was just like 2 years. But it wasn't as urgent as it is, I think, for you and for your client. And I want to talk about that because a sense of belonging, a sense of identity is very much tied to our big conversation of mental health, of African spirituality. Eventually we will arrive to that, but let's talk about what you are finding on a personal level and also with your clients about this.
I love that question, and I love the different levels. And I'm going to add another level. I think there is a personal level, obviously for me, and then from each of my clients individually. But there's also a collective level, a collective identity. And I think that so for me personally, that sense of belonging, that sense of who am I, because I grew up, I'm from Angola. I grew up mainly in Angola, but I did travel a lot. And also as an adult, going to study and coming back and then traveling around. So I don't know whether it was out of necessity, but my sense of belonging comes from within. I don't need to be in a particular space in order to feel that I belong. And when I come into a space, I don't necessarily look for people like me, whether it's based on race, culture, language, occupation, because as I enumerated them, there are many groups to which I belong. But I do think that the African identity has been battered and abused and mistreated and abandoned in many ways, in a big way collectively. So for me, it became important to also attend to that aspect of my identity, recognizing that for historical reasons, look at my name. My last name is Portuguese. And names are so important. And I leave it there. I wouldn't take it away because it tells the history. It tells my history and the history of my ancestors. But I am very conscious that I have a Portuguese last name, and I'm not necessarily happy about that. My parents at least were clever enough to give myself and my sisters African names, our given names, which in the space where we grew up, at the time where we grew up, it wasn't actually the norm. But what was the question? I feel like
we're exploring sense of belonging and identity, and what that's like for you, Jenny, through all of that.
Yes. So for me, that's it. For me personally, it's my sense of belonging is very much internal. For many of my clients, it can be very different depending on their experience. For some of my clients who have grown up in Europe, it is very, very difficult because they have grown up feeling like they were an anomaly. And this is something that although I cannot relate to from my personal experience, I can empathize with because I can see around me, you know, what happens in the experiences that people go through. And I mean, just from a visual sense, I can imagine that you know, being, if you're a blue marble in a box of red marbles, obviously you will notice that you are a blue marble among all the other red
Yeah.
marbles. And that has an effect on the psyche. So
Mm.
that's one of the things about, but I think there is a current, and I think that's a global one, not just for people of African descent in Europe, but I think that even people on the continent and in the diaspora everywhere, the different waves of diasporas,
Mm.
I think there is a big search, more than a, yeah, there's a big search, there's a big movement towards returning to our identity as Africans and walking into places and owning our Africanness. And
Mm.
I love being a part of that
Mm.
in a way that is bigger than myself, right? Because I can obviously do it for myself, but to be able to help other women do it is just fantastic.
It's an honor. It's so
Mm.
beautiful. It's a powerful journey that we're all in. One of, as you were talking about your name, it's one of the things that we talk about a lot, because we find that a lot of erasure has been done to African people in the biggest things, right? In our spiritualities, our culture, how we are taught things, education, we use different languages and so on. And then when it sips on a very personal level where, you know, people call me, my first name is Suzanne, but everyone calls me Joy, the English name, because it's easier. And I grew up being called Joy, such that it's now my intuitive name, you know, but like it's a little, I know there's a little bit of erasure to it there happening as well. And just thinking about this return to identity, to our identity, this return to our ways, our customs, our spirituality, and just really mitigating these erasures that exist already on a personal level. Every single day, you see how much your people have been erased, and it can get you to thinking about mental health. I'm trying to bring in mental health and how this really affects us. This form in many different forms of erasures and how they influence our mental well-being. Let's talk a bit about that and what you're finding and your thoughts on it.
Oh, I mean, in so many ways, as you were talking about the erasure, I started thinking about how that manifests in our personal lives. One of the big things you mentioned, a number of things where the erasure, a number of elements where the erasure was perpetrated, and I think one of them as well is art, our art, and how it was pillaged and how it was destroyed, how it was stolen and taken away and hidden away in cabinets, and we still have to fight to get it back, as well as the systems of passing down the crafts, our forms of storytelling, the oral storytelling, and the traditions that have been broken, so that there has been, I have come to know, I was going to say believe, but I have come to know that nothing is ever lost, but there was an interruption there and a breakage. For me, I experienced that in my own, for example, when I had my children and I had to name them, every single time it was an excruciating process, because I didn't know what to name my children. I did speak to my mother, but I had to make an effort to go and I, in the end, I still wasn't satisfied, because I could really feel that there was something missing there, right? The erasure, right? I could feel that there was a culture, there was a lineage, and there was a people
Mm.
I'm linked to them, but there's this hole in the middle that I couldn't at the time reach all the way to where the cord was cut.
Mm.
And I experienced this in a very real way. It wasn't some abstract thing. And
Mm.
it's just an example of how it can affect our mental health,
Mm.
right? Because I felt like I was hanging loose, like I didn't, this is one of the times where the sense of belonging became a little bit more sort of, I needed something more external in
Mm.
terms of belonging,
Mm.
and I didn't find it. And that can leave you really wondering, who are you and how did you land here, and where do you go if you don't even know where you came from?
Mm.
And how do you enter spaces not knowing who you are? I mean that on a deep level, right?
Mm.
And hold your own. And
Mm.
how does then your inability to hold your own in any space because of not having that connection, how does that affect your mental health?
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
I think mental health comes down, and I really prefer your term of mental well-being.
Mm.
I think mental well-being comes down to one thing. I mean, we can go and get PhDs in psychology and psychiatry and, you know, experiment with all sorts of things, but it really comes down with something very simple, which is non-alignment. There is who you are as spirit, a soul, and why you're here, and there is who you're being.
Mm.
And if you're not being who you are, this is mental unwellness.
Mm.
Right?
Mm. Mm.
That's
Yeah,
really down to.
I love that. I mean, I resonate with that. One of the things that I like talking about with a friend of mine who struggled with bipolar, and she's been to a mental hospital, and she's like, she comes back from it, and she's like, you know, Joy, that is just the spiritual battleground. That's where I come from. Every single person there is some misalignment at a very spiritual level. And I know that trying to treat us with our body and with the pill, and I understand why they believe it will work, but they're not tapping into the core roots of what's actually happening. It's just the spiritual, but and I'm just like, I have felt that as well, having been there. Um, and just working with people as well. The things that really trouble us, that core roots, they go all the way back to spirit and us being out of alignment with them, and just maybe not knowing that that's what's happening, and struggling to come back to balance, to come back to alignment, come back to homeostasis. So it's an interesting thing, and I wanted to bring that in for you as someone who works with mental health on a daily basis, what you are finding to be the core. I mean, it's many things, but what you just said it. But yeah, exploring a bit more on that, on mental health and this holistic misalignment that's happening with people at a spiritual level. Mm.
It's related to what you just said. You said being in misalignment and not knowing.
Mm.
It's the not knowing, and the not knowing goes back to the erasure that you were talking about. Um, it goes back to, we are growing up completely, you know, outside of our community systems that transmitted to us a philosophy for who we are and why we're here, and had rituals that aided us in moving from one stage to the next,
Mm.
to the next, to the next. And so we don't have this education, because education has come to mean, a Western education, sitting in school and learning English and maths or whatever the language, learning to read and write, learning, the maths and the sciences. So I'll actually pause here and come back a bit, because for me, even though I don't like to speak of Africanness in relation to Westernness, because we exist in and of ourselves. There is no need to constantly measure ourselves against Westernness.
I love that.
However, in this particular case, I want to bring in the Western model of addressing mental health. And actually, it's the mainstream Western model of addressing mental health, so that we can understand how our system is supposed to work and why it's no longer working. Because we have inherited this Western system through colonization. Basically, a system was instituted where the only possible form of government and of social organizations are the Western ones. And so how we educate our children, how we treat our bodies and our minds and it's all modeled after the Western system. The mainstream Western system. And I stress that because there is also a space and a movement within the Western world that is trying to preserve and go back to ancient, old spiritual models that also existed in Europe, because they existed everywhere. The indigenous spiritual practices and healing practices. There are differences in how, in the specific ritual and what is used for specific ritual, but all cultures really did the same. And I think that in order to understand a little bit what happened to us, we have to understand what happened in Europe first, because before they went and destroyed the indigenous healthcare and social and spiritual systems everywhere in the world, they destroyed it at home first. Between the Middle Ages and the modern age, there was the huge, the witch hunt, and there was a huge clampdown on what they called paganism, and that is actually also in Europe and in the US and Canada. Also, there's also a resurgence of people going back to their what's the word I'm looking for? To their ancient gods and the way they worshipped, and that direct connection between each one of us and the divine, which is really all that this is about. Because in order to control people, they made that cut. I mean, even in the Catholic Church, right? People were not allowed to read the Bible anymore and get the word directly. There was somebody who mediated that for them, because it was so much power for people to have. And this is why witches were seen as a threat, and this is why they were hunted down and burned at the stake, because they had power. They were in tune with their own natural power. They were in tune with their own connection to the divine, and it was not possible to control people in that way. So when Europeans ventured out to colonize the world, the first thing that they did was to attack the spiritual systems as well, and the social systems, and break them down, because then people were disenfranchised, disconnected, and there was also the divide and rule. I mean, there's so much that goes into that, but I want to just kind of focus on the spiritual. And then what emerged in Europe after that was more of the scientific, what led to the scientific method. And I should have, I have this drawing that I use sometimes. It's just if you imagine a big square divided up in four equally, and this is a model of wholeness and who we are, and really the whole world in the universe. So one quadrant will be the physical, the next one will be emotional, mental, and spiritual. That's all of who we are. I mean, this is just an illustration to put it in a square and divide it up, but it's not divided up that neatly. And what the dominant Western view to everything has done is it has focused on the physical, and it has ignored all the other ones. Then you have fields like psychology that come in and address the mental and emotional, but they do it separately from the physical. Right now, we're looking at your feelings, we're looking at your thoughts and your mind, but we're completely ignoring what's happening to you physically. And the spiritual has been all but completely erased.
Yeah.
And there can be no balance unless we are paying attention to all four quadrants. This is the problem with the main approach to mental health. And this is why we went so far as to believe now that what we need is pills to numb the feelings. What psychotropic drugs do is they numb the feelings. The feelings are giving you information so that you can take direction. So you're numbing that. So now you've lost your communication system, which was so cleverly designed to give you information about how to navigate the world. And then there is a huge a lot of marketing around the benefits of these drugs and how wonderful they are, and push to develop our systems in our countries in Africa to now begin to prescribe these drugs. And then, nothing about the side effects, and the side effects are awful. The side effects of these drugs are absolutely terrible. And we don't even have the health systems then to manage the conditions that these side effects cause. And then we have to start sending people abroad to get treatment, and the cycle continues of milking. There's also an economic implication to that, right? Of milking the Africans, not only the soil for its natural resources, but also for the little money that we can make. Now we keep putting it back in the Western economy, because that's the only way of getting well. That's the only way of doing things. That's the only way. And that's not true. There's no single way of doing anything. When the first European navigators came to our shores, they didn't find people dying. They didn't find people starving. They found organized societies. That means that people were already practicing things that were keeping them well. They had healing practices that were healing them when something went wrong, and that things were working. They were feeding themselves. They had systems of producing food in order to feed themselves. So how can it now be that the only way to do it is the industrialized way, is the Western way? You have to keep redirecting me, because I will go places.
Yeah, I'm listening, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm agreeing with everything, and it's so fascinating what you're sharing, and I think it's really important for us to know the history. I love the history that you took of how this disconnection didn't just start here. It was a very global movement that was going on, and I think it's so important to understand that, and that's why it's been it was so easy for it to go on for many, many years, many centuries, because it was done at for every human community that exists. They tried to cut it. Some people were able to preserve it. And as you're speaking, the only thing that's coming into my mind is, and this is something that comes up a lot in my work, is how the core of the human problems, human issues we have is separation, and how we're constantly separating and disconnecting things. We have disconnected ourselves from the four systems that we are, right? And that's why there's an imbalance and misalignment. We separated from divinity, from spirituality, yet it's like where we spring forth from, right? And even as we go down to even the beginning of our conversation of any feeling of sense of identity, sense of belonging, sometimes when we use our mind to think about it, it's geared towards you already believing you're separated from other people, right? Or that your identity will separate you from people. And I think what you said in the very beginning of understanding that, I mean, there's a wholeness to it. We can try to compare the Africanness and the Western and what happened there, but at the core of it, it's one. You know, the law of one is at play here. And yeah, this separation, I see it happening at this very global level. And I see it happening at a very individual level of how we like separating ourselves from our emotions, from our experiences with people, from our culture, our customs, from our desires, our dreams, our future. If anything, we like leaning so much to the past, being identifying with the past, especially the dysfunction and everything that went wrong in the past. And that's why I think mental health thrives, like mental struggle. And perhaps I don't know if it's social media, but sometimes I feel like a lot of us, we are struggling mentally to exist in this separated metric system that we all belong to. And I think this separation is a big problem.
It's not sustainable if you unplug any device from the power source. Eventually, right now my battery is at 100% because it's plugged in. But if I unplug it in 5, 6, 10 hours, it will run out of battery. And if I don't plug it back in, I have no energy. How can I move through the world? How can I
exist? Yeah. So now the plug was done for just bringing it a bit to Africa now, done to us, where we were removed from our source, our spiritual systems, and customs, traditions, cultures, art, everything. We were unplugged, unplugged and unplugged. And we were convinced that, the plug was wrong in the first place. We were just plugging into a wrong source.
Yes.
That,
I think that right there is actually the major obstacle, the major thing that needs to change, and I think this actually ties into development. Because we will never, ever, ever do well. We will never thrive as a people. We will never thrive as a continent as long as we are going to get solutions elsewhere. You can be inspired by things from other places. You can adapt them. You can whatever. But if you feel that your own, how did you put it? You put it so well that our own source was, that there was something wrong with our own source, because that is actually where all the answers are. I really believe that we will only move forward as a people when we collectively plug back into our source.
How do we do that? Where do we start with plugging back in? And just even bringing this a little bit to the individual and understanding what that will look like for them to plug back in.
Yes.
Mm.
I think that is where it starts. It starts with the individual. It cannot start anywhere else. And I think it starts where each and every one of us return to our spiritual traditions. And I don't think it has to be anything complicated or hyper mystical, or we have access to so much. And this is where I think ancestors are very important. They are here, they are present with us, they want our attention, they want to help us, but we are looking elsewhere. We are always looking elsewhere. And I think that how we start is I think that we have already begun. Actually, I think that the work that you do and the work that I do is very much about, first of all, for ourselves to develop that relationship with our ancestors, and to 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 pay homage to them, to work with them, um, and then to help other people do the same. And I think what's happening is we are in the process of creating a critical mass, and at some point it's going to tip. And when enough of us have turned back to our ancestors, um, I don't even know what's going to happen. I think it's going to be so out of this world that I don't have the ability right now to imagine.
Oh, it gets me so excited just thinking about it. It's like, oh my God, it would just be so phenomenal. Because I keep listening to the radio sometimes and hearing people, and I get a little bit frustrated because we are doing all these solutions development ideas through the lens of separation, right? Through the lens of neglecting spirit. And I think for us, African people, is even for us, it wasn't that we don't even look at spirit, because I think that we are very spiritual as people. Our cultures, yeah, our customs, everything in Africa. You go to a wedding, it's a spiritual phenomenon. You go to a baby being born, it's very. Our ancestors were also smart. As much as they tried to erase, they were very, very smart in how they fused in our spiritual systems into our customs, into our traditions, into how we do things. For example, for us in Botswana, the names that every child is given is Botswana name. It's always, it's always a saying, and it's always very. I often feel like it's the ancestors were naming your life, and I always keep seeing it coming up and up and up with everyone. I ask what is your name, and I like working with the energies of names. And I find that, they might have taken the spiritual um, rituals and tools, but they fused it into every other part of ourselves, and that's the beauty. Like your name. Look at what your name is saying and how you're living up to it. This was a good omen from your ancestors, and that's the beauty of it. And so it's just more of, I find that in my journey of walking the sacred path, I needed to start looking and see what the ancestors have been doing as a way to preserve us during this erasure period of time. And just it's healing for me just to start realizing that, oh my God, it's everywhere. This wisdom is everywhere. I got excited there, but yeah.
Because you realize that nothing is ever lost.
Yeah. Yes, you were telling me, because I was frustrated with you, that a great ancestor of mine was a traditional healer who worked with plant medicine, and he knew how to treat many illnesses with plants. And these plants, he got the inspiration from his ancestry as well. And so it was downloaded to him, and he cannot really scientifically explain why that plant works, because that's what spirit is like. It works because it's coming from spirit, right? And I was getting frustrated because I was like, he was so good with healing, and that information was not preserved, that all his children and great grandchildren do not know what he was doing to do that healing. And for me as a healer now, I'm feeling frustrated because I'm like, I wish I knew what he was doing. I wish he was here to teach me. And you told me that nothing is ever lost. I want you to tell the people what you told me. I thought it was incredible.
What did I say? I think that's what I said. I said nothing is ever lost. He's not here physically to pass it on. It wasn't passed on physically, and it looks like it's been lost, but it hasn't, because even though, you know, before you started your initiation, your training started before your actual initiation, when you know, because you shared the story of how you found your uncle's notebooks and with his dreams, and how that was the beginning really of your training. So as you said, you know, the ancestors have put these things everywhere, names everywhere. They have also prepared the way for us to be trained in their absence, in the absence of that sort of physical linear continuity. And you know, I found the same with me, because I have no knowledge of any healers in my ancestry. Like, so I'm sure there were some. I don't know of it because of you know, of that breakage. And yet I have felt guided to move in the ways that I have, and I have been yes, and I have been given information that then later, you know, a lot of what I learned, especially in the beginning about spirituality, didn't come from learning about African spirituality specifically because I was in a space. I think they also work with, they meet you where you are. If you're over here, they want to teach you is over here, they will approximate and slowly bring you to that teaching that's over there. So it's never lost.
That's the beauty of it. Which means then that Africa is not lost, right?
No,
It feels
it's
like
not.
we are, right? Yeah. Now taking it to someone who might be watching this, but they are feeling lost and
Yes.
they are struggling from a mental perspective, mental well-being perspective, and they are trying to do the return. What could they possibly start with, or in terms of like this return, or to balance, this return to wholeness, this return to alignment? Both, I guess, the practical and other shifts that have to happen at a deeper level. Yes, we're back.
I think the first thing I'd want to tell this person is to know that no matter how bad it looks right now, no matter how bad it feels, you can come back to you, to wholeness. You can come back to wholeness. It's it's a guarantee. I think next, there's so many ways to access wellness, to access wholeness. And I think for me, that's the other beauty of it. I am fascinated by how many ways you can heal.
Me too.
There isn't a single prescription. You can, so the easiest thing is just go out and be in nature, wherever you are. Go for a walk, whether it's the bush, the beach, whatever it looks like where you are, whether it's the ocean, the sea, the forest, the desert, it doesn't really matter. Just be out in nature. Actually, here's a very good prescription. If you every day in the morning before your day gets completely, go for a walk in nature, 20 minutes, 20 minutes every day, I promise you that within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you will be feeling better. And when you get to that place of feeling better, then you can actually begin to think about next steps. Because if you're really down and out, you just really need something to to you need to bring your energy back, almost back to zero, right? It's sort of from minus just back to zero, so you can breathe and look around and see. If you go for a walk 20 minutes, whether it's in a park, whether it's on the beach, wherever it is out in nature, just by yourself, I promise you 20 minutes, not more, every day, you will be, even if you skip the weekend because, I don't know, you have children or whatever, it won't be long before you'll feel better. And
especially if you put the
then
phone
you will
away.
feel inspired. Yes?
I say, especially if you do the walk without your phone.
Thank you for adding that. Yes, leave the phone at home.
Yeah, the idea is to be with yourself. Yeah.
Yes, you don't need to be listening to music. You don't need to be listening to a podcast. You don't need, just go out and walk for 20 minutes. And then from there, you will be inspired in how to move forward. If you make a commitment with yourself, if you make an intention that you want to get well, you will be guided towards that, whatever works for you, because it's so different for everyone.
As you're speaking, what comes to my head is really the return to wholeness. A lot of it is also the return to intuition. It's the return to your own inner voice, your own inner landscape, your own inner. I mean, I love the word inner. I do that work, but I have found, for me on a personal level, a lot of healing by returning to my own intuition, to listening to myself. And I generate my entire life and generate a state of balance, a state of alignment, and a state of abundance, a state of well-being, just from that, from just first connecting with myself. And then because it's really connecting with the divine, right, around you. And that's, if we can spring everything from that space, the body can, bring itself back to homeostasis. Your mind, your mental will bring itself back to it's so beautiful. It's so intricate, but so beautiful, and also so simple. Because I think people will be like, just a walk? Are you sure? Is that enough?
Yes, a lot of times I get clients and they come and they're like, so, you're going to give me some homework? Are we going to... But I was like, and it takes them a while to figure out that actually, they can just come and relax and we can just talk and that's it. Really. You don't have to do anything complicated.
No.
I think you said something important about tuning back into intuition, being the same as tuning in to the divine. And here's where there's a very good piece of African spirituality. So we have obviously many cultures in Africa, and each culture has its own spiritual traditions. But there are some main tenets that they all share. So when I speak about African spirituality in general terms, that's what I mean. I'm talking about the main tenets that guide all of the different African spiritual systems within the continent as well as in the diaspora. And one of them is that we are all part of the divine. We are God. There is no God outside of us. We are God. So when we turn back into ourselves, when we go within, that's who we find. That's what we find. And the guidance is clear and is enough.
Oh my God, yes. I love that. It is so, so, so powerful, so profound, so simple, because it's within. It means that you already have everything that you need within.
Everything. It's funny you say that, because I was thinking this morning, for some reason, I don't know how my train of thought was going, but I was thinking of how we struggle to be ourselves and how we cause so much pain and struggle through that, including mental pain and struggle. And I was thinking about a tree and a seed, and I thought about it, and then I was like, so let me think about a big tree. So I thought about a baobab, because it's so majestic. And so when you eat the baobab fruit and you have those, you know, when you suck on the seed and you put it aside, that seed is about this size.
Mm.
Inside each one of those seeds, there's already a big, majestic baobab. It's already in there.
Mm. Wow.
And that seed doesn't go and say, oh, am I good enough to become a baobab? Am I pretty enough? Am I smart enough? I'm not going to grow because the palm trees say that they are the one, so I'm going to stay small. It doesn't do that. It just, if you put it in the soil and you get some water and get some nutrients, and it will grow into a baobab.
Mm.
So just to go back to what you were saying, so inside of us, we already have everything that we are. We actually don't have to do anything. All we have to do is accept it and be aligned and nourish ourselves physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and we will grow into whatever we are supposed to be.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
very simple.
It's so simple. As you're saying the story of the Baba, I'm like, the Baba doesn't see itself separate from the forest, from its Baba sisters and brothers. It sees it as a worthy part of the Baba forest, right? And the entire planet. And it matters, and all it has to do is bloom as its own baobab tree, you know? It's so simple, but we think we need to go outside to get this so that we can grow like this because that's the best way to be a baobab. They said that your trees should fall like this. It's
Exactly. Oh, maybe I should be slimmer. I'm too
yeah.
fat as a baobab.
What? You know? And it's funny because when we, as human beings, when we see things, if you see a couple of baobabs, you never think of judging and say, but that one, you see them as trees, you see them as baobab, as a collective, beautiful forest. The same with dogs, you know that this is this kind of breed, and that's fine. That's the breed, you know, that's the other one, and you love them equally. Maybe you resonate with another one, but you're never thinking that one is withier than the other, or that that one should have had that one. But then, you know, God, I call it the diversified unity. In our diversity, we are united, we are one, and God is all that. Or if we're all the same, then we would just, what would be the point? You know?
There will actually be no life because one of the fundamental tenets of life, one of the fundamental conditions for life to grow and continue to expand is diversity. There is no life without diversity because if everything is the same, if every cell was the same, and it was affected by some sort of pest, then the whole thing would die off, and there would be no one would survive. Nothing would survive, and that is why we have diversity and evolution.
Yeah. One of the tenets of African spirituality, I think it's all around the concept of Ubuntu. In my language, we say Motho ke motho ka batho, which essentially means a human is a human because of other people, with other people, and so on and so forth. And one of the practices that I've been doing with my clients is actually teaching them to tap into this ideology on a real DNA intuitive level of what will that feel like to really believe that I'm interconnected, and then to really believe that this interconnection in my own uniqueness is I am already perfect and I already fit in the whole, this unit that is all of us. And I find it really healing to start feeling and sensing and connecting with your own interconnectedness and how you are worthy to be part of this oneness. It's so big at a big level, but then you trickle it down to your entire life at a human life level. Are you feeling interconnected to your life, to your dreams, to people around you, to how you serve, how you show up? And we start with that and we start healing that. and then you just see your mental well-being coming back, your bones start moving, and there you are making beautiful art, singing, and returning to the divinity, right? Mm. Yeah.
I was just thinking a couple of things, more specific things I want to say about mental health from an
Mm.
African spirituality perspective.
Mm.
So the Western model of mental health is a model of pathology.
Mm.
So that, whatever you're going through, it's a pathology. Then somebody will go and make up a name for that and call it a disease. And
Mm.
so it's something that needs to be fixed and needs to be removed. From an African spirituality perspective, it's not a pathology. It's a process, and what you need is help. For example, if you're going through, and actually, I would go as far as saying that it's the same for physical illness.
Mm.
There's no difference really. Energetically, there is no difference between physical illness and mental illness.
Mm.
So, but when you're, so say you have, I don't know, a deep depression or anxiety, or I don't know what else they like to diagnose people with, bipolar disorder.
Mm.
Um, so within the context, within the context of African spirituality, you wouldn't necessarily diagnose it. That's not the most important thing. What you would see is that there is an imbalance and that the person isn't well. And they need, and I think there are two things. There's the healer, sort of shamanic illness kind of aspect of it, that many healers, that is how they find their path. You go through a serious illness, whether it's mental illness or physical illness, and then you are aided in moving through it so that you can emerge on the other side of it as the healer that you are becoming.
Mm.
So it's the call in a way, and that is not necessarily recognized in the Western context. That's often called a spiritual emergency.
Mm.
And there are groups in Europe that are also fighting for that, psychosis. Like, for example, in the UK, where I trained for a long time, there's a group called, now I forget, but they're a site, the Hearing Voices Network, I think it's called.
Mm.
And yet they fight for the freedom to go through their spiritual emergencies and not be locked up in a hospital and forced to, have chemical substances forced into their bodies. And there are people who are also working in a shamanic way to help people through their spiritual emergencies. So what is needed in that instance is basically someone to hold the space to facilitate the process.
Mm.
The problem is that now it's happening in a sense, outside of the context of that understanding, and say, so instead of getting help to go through your process, right, you get these treatments that are actually blocking the process.
Mm.
That's one aspect of it. So I think that the more we accept and recognize that that's what it is, the more we will, and our healers are needed.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, there's this book called The Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron. She talks about the sensitive type and how it's what a lot of people are now talking about as empaths.
Yeah.
And so we are 20 to 25%, all healers are in that category. 20 to 25% of the population, no matter where you go. So God already took care of public health.
Right? Already. That's a lot of people also. 25% is a lot of people.
Yes, which to me, that tells me that is how much we need to keep the society healthy.
Mm.
Obviously, each healer will specialize in their own area, but nature has already provided for it. We are here. So a lot of healers then are being locked up in mental institutions instead of being out in the community doing the good work that they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the first aspect. The second one is that I think I talked a little bit about it before, how our feelings actually are, they our feelings show us the separation, right? When we're doing this, our body will tell us. And so it's what we need help doing then is realigning so we can be well. And I think that's really the work that I do with my clients. They come and they think there's something wrong with them. Somebody diagnosed them with something, or they've diagnosed themselves with something, but they believe that there's something wrong with them and that they need to be fixed, and they think that I'm going to fix them. Well, they discover very quickly that I'm not going to fix them because there's nothing wrong with them, because there's nothing wrong with being unwell. It just means it's just information that you use to realign, right?
Yeah.
So those were the two things I wanted to say about it.
Yeah, I love that, because I think that a lot of disease, illness, whether that's physical or emotional, they're just markers, for a psycho-emotional and a psycho-spiritual misalignment, as we've been saying, right? But I think, the system that we currently live with assumes that it will fix disease, illness with physical things like pills and go into the gym. And while that works, sometimes the thing is our body, the entire four systems that you mentioned in the beginning, was if left alone and if utilized all of them, they will recreate, they will bring themselves back to homeostasis by themselves. There's nothing that needs to be introduced to the system.
Just like nature, we are self-healing.
Yes, exactly. Self-healing. I love that. I mean, I love the first point you mentioned, because I've always believed in that as well. I have seen, for me, one of the things that pushed me to psychology was because I had a family history of mental illness, schizophrenia and bipolar, chronic depression existing in many of my ancestry. And, I always knew there was something spiritual ongoing happening, and my family, we have a lot of healers and a lot of teachers, a lot of, even if you're a teacher, if you're a priest, that's healing work, but we also have healers like shamanic healers and so on. And many of my generation and my mother's generation, many of them didn't follow in with that intuitive nudges, that soul mission, what you mentioned in the beginning. And so there was that misalignment with that soul needs and soul mission and what they were actually doing in their lives. That was the misalignment. And then it manifested in chronic depression, it manifested into schizophrenia and so on. And this is why, for me, I love that we need to start talking about this holistically, looking at the four things. What's happening physically, what's happening emotionally, what's happening mentally, what's happening spiritually. And we can attend to them separately, but that's delaying the process. We have to do all at once. You must look, because you're all this.
That's a very good point, actually. That is a very good point.
Yeah. So, I mean, this has just been such a brilliant conversation. I'm so nourished. I've been smiling the whole time. And there were parts of the conversation where when you're saying something really profound, the light will just shower you. Did you see that? It was so beautiful. So I kept smiling like...
I experience it with my clients a lot, actually. So I know what you're talking about. A lot of times when they will say something and there will be this, just sometimes there's a halo, actually.
Yeah, so there was just a little light. I was just like, oh my God, you're so special. Like, yeah, tell them. So beautiful, because they've been with us today. I saw them and just been so wonderful. Such an important conversation for people out there who actually think there's something wrong with them. No, you're not. There's nothing wrong with you. There is just a misalignment. Right. And I love what you say. It's like, that's a message of, your communication system telling you something is off. Nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to reject or run away from, just to listen and then do what's required.
Because what we do is we run away from it, but it keeps coming back. Then we keep having the same problem in different shapes and forms, and we wonder why. Until you go through it, you're gonna keep doing that.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for giving us this really profound, powerful conversation on something that's so important. I am so grateful for you for saying yes and just honoring us with your wisdom.
Thank you, Joy. It was an honor for me as well.
Yay. Amazing. Amazing. So one last thing, if you want to share with everyone who's going to watch this on how they can connect with you and just do more work with you, if they want to do the return to wholeness, the return to home, the return to Ubuntu oneness.
Okay, thank you. Well, I work online, so it doesn't really matter where you are, and I work it's a talking therapy, right? I don't do any of, although my work is very much informed by African spirituality, but it's just talking therapy. I don't do any rituals. I don't do any, because I'm not trained in that. But hopefully in the future I'll be able to.
Yeah, I think you will.
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is either on my website, yemaferreira.com, or on Facebook, Ancestors Healing, and Twitter, it's at Yema Ferreira as well. And if you go to either my website or my Facebook page, there is a button that says book now. I think that's what it says. And if you follow that link, it will take you to my electronic calendar, and there you can book a free call for 30 minutes where I can find out about what you want, what you're looking for. You can ask me any questions, and we can see whether we are a good match to work together. If we are, then we can decide on that call and take the next steps. Yeah, I think that's how you get a hold of me.
Yay! Amazing, amazing. Connect with Yem. I found you because I read this powerful article that you wrote on ancestry healing. You guys should also just Google her, and this article will come as well.
Right. Yes, I didn't. Yeah, there's a blog on my website with different articles about basically the way I view mental health and how I approach my work in helping bring people back to wellness.
Yeah. So
that was a very popular article.
Yeah, just really profound. It's like, yes, someone is talking about this finally. So thank you for blessing us. Connect with her. She will do. I love what you're saying, which is that even talk therapy is grounded in African spiritualities. Our grandmothers used to come and sit under the tree and just talk and release and purge, and then they will be back to well-being. So take this opportunity to heal like your grandparents, your ancestors.
I love that.
Bye, guys. Thank you for joining us with the Joy Mohan Show. Okay.
Thank you. It was great hanging out with you guys. Talking.
Love and light.